Welcome to the Cigar Caucus. Today we're joined by a man whose political journey spans the Virginia governor's mansion, the State House, the U.S. Senate, George Allen, known for his unapologetic optimism, his cowboy boots, and his commitment to American innovation. George Allen has always brought a Reagan-esque spirit to every office he held. Whether championing high-tech growth or pushing for tax relief, he governed with grit and a grin. Today, we'll explore the personal side of public service, the mentors, the moments, and the memories that shaped his path. So pour a cup, light a cigar, settle in. This isn't just politics, it's legacy and conversation. George served as governor of Virginia from 1994 to 1998 and as U.S. Senator from 2001 to 2007. A son of legendary NFL coach George Allen Sr., he brought a coach's tenacity to the political arena, reforming welfare, overhauling education, advocating for energy independence long before it became fashionable. But beyond the headlines, George Allen is a storyteller, a thinker, and a man who believes the promise of America. Today, we'll talk about the lessons he learned from his father, the values that guided his leadership, and the legacy he hopes to leave behind. So, George, welcome. Thank you for joining me today as my guest.
Well, it's a pleasure being with you, Tim. I love serving with you, and Susan and I admire your wonderful bride, Randy, too. I know this is a cigar store. I generally chew them, and I chew Copenhagen. And that ends up being from the days when my father was coaching the Chicago Bears. He was defensive coach. And they had a guy named Doug Atkins, gigantic defensive end, played at Tennessee and played for the Bears. My father, as kids, he try to use incentives. And he says, all right, when you turn 21, if you don't smoke, drink, or cuss, you'll get $3,000 or a car. He didn't say anything about chewing. And I was 8 years old, and I was at the Bears training camp, which was at St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, Indiana, just in the midst of cornfields. The only thing fun to do there is go swim in a quarry, or there was a dirt race track, and the first driver if a driver turned his car all the way over, he'd get $5. And that's got me liking stock car racing. But Doug Atkins told me to go they all chewed loose leaf, things like Mail Pouch and Beech Nut and Red Man and all that. So he tells me as an 8-year-old, go and get me my Beech Nut out of my Scout. That was his vehicle. So I go get it. And, kids, you're always chewing gum. And so him and Bill George and all these guys who chewed said, oh, just put some of that in your mouth. And it was sweet at first. And they said, you don't need to spit, you can swallow it. And I got as close to throwing up as possible with it. And I didn't try it again until I was 13 and knowing what in the heck I'm doing. So I'm sorry to get off on that tangent, but you're talking about cigars. I like to chew them.
I remember the Coke cans in the Republican conference, and you had to have something to spit that in.
Yeah, me and Conrad Burns and of Montana and Richard Burr of North Carolina. We were the dippers.
I was always warned to check my Coke can if I was sitting next to one of you guys. All right, since you did a little football start there, I'm going to read some quotes from your father, and then I want you to talk about your father and what you learned from him as regard leadership. Okay, you both are very quotable, by the way. Winning is the science of being totally prepared. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I agree.
For a good life, this is one of my favorites too. Work like a dog, eat like a horse, think like a fox, and play like a rabbit. That's probably his most famous quote. And then he said, work hard, stay positive, and get up early. And I think you've exemplified those traits, but talk about what you learned from your father regarding leadership.
Well, all those things are true. There's so many of them, and our show's not long enough for it. uh, everything
We'll go
preparation.
long. We'll go long, George.
No,
Go ahead.
but preparation is essential. To perform well, you need to be prepared. It means doing your research ahead of time, scouting the other team, understanding what the playing field would be. It's like Tim, if you're going to speak to some group, you want to know, is there a podium or not? Is there a microphone? How many people are going to be there? How many elected key people should be identified, or at least know they're there? Is there a stage? What's the lighting? Where's the parking? Where are you going to park? I mean, all these kind of things. And then obviously the content of whatever your remarks or whatever you're there to be on a panel or individual speaker or whatever is going to be questions and answers and so forth. And so you want to be prepared. My father would even be so meticulous that he'd figure out at this time of the day in the afternoon, where is the sun? Because the punt returner or the receivers might have the sun in their eyes. And so I just think of all of those type of things. And preparation is crucial. And he'd say the difference between winning and losing is this much. And you see so many games. It's, the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins. He had on people's desk, this is when he was in the USFL, is what I'm doing or about to do, getting us closer to our objective, winning. So people are not wasting time being distracted from what their purpose and their mission and their focus must be, and that is winning and helping the team win. That's the way a campaign needs to be. It needs to be folks that are not off, just surfing the internet and getting distracted on whatever latest tweet or Facebook post or Instagram comes across. So you need to have people just dedicated to it. His most famous quote probably is, "The future is now." And that came about when he came to the Redskins, who had not made the playoffs since the 1940s with Sammy Baugh. Some of your listeners may not have any idea who Sammy Baugh is, but he was truly one of the greatest. I'm not going to get off on that tangent. At any rate, a guy named Warner Wolf, my father was trading for veterans, trading draft choices and trading for older players who wouldn't make as many mistakes, who the other teams thought were washed up or thought they were malcontents. But my father figured he could motivate them into a team and togetherness. And so this reporter said to him, he says, "Well, you're trading all these draft choices. What about the future of the team?" He says, this franchise has not made the playoffs since the 1940s. We need to win now. The future is now. And he started that winning tradition, never had a losing season at all in any of the professional NFL or USFL teams that he coached. And this, let me see if I can point this right there.
Yeah.
This is a plaque that says, "If not us, who? If not now, when?" My father got appointed by President Reagan to be chair of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. And this is a Ronald Reagan quote. My father had that in his office. When my father died, my mother gave it to me. My father died New Year's Eve, 1990. And she said, "You should have this." And I had that on my mantle in the governor's office and in my Senate office. And it was just for us, for our whole team, whether it's the governor's administration or Senate office, to say, we're going to take responsibility. It's us. Don't say somebody else is going to do it. And the urgency of doing something now rather than dawdling or waiting for it. And so, they're words of action and personal responsibility. And I know my father was motivated by it. And I was and tried to inculcate that same sort of motivation to everyone. As you know, in the Senate staff, you can't do it alone. You need to have good staff members preparing you for committee meetings or whatever amendments are coming up on a bill. You want to know why you're voting for or against, or what are the arguments for or against any particular proposition. So those are some of the things. That the other thing with my father, he had these posters: consistency and keep fighting. And I think anybody in politics, there's a few people, I suppose, who never have a setback. I can't imagine living without setbacks. But one of the things he would say is don't brood over your mistakes or getting knocked down. Get back up, learn from your mistakes, improve, have that fighting spirit, and hit hard or work hard and watch good things happen. So those are broadly a lot of the things that I still live by and try to share with others who ask me to somewhat mentor them.
Well, those are powerful lessons for life, and
Yeah,
certainly for politics. Uh, how old were you when your father was coaching for the Redskins? Where were
that
you?
was I was a teenager till through law school.
Do you have any
So
memories from the sidelines?
yeah, there are a lot of memories from the sidelines. And that was a great thing. You look back on life and appreciate as a kid going to training camp when my father was an assistant coach for the Bears and then he was with the Rams. We moved out there when I was in high school and then moved to Virginia when he came to the Redskins. But my father always allowed me to be at training camp and also on the sidelines for games. And so if you're yelling stuff on the sidelines and insults, uh, you can hear them as opposed to being up in the stands. Yeah, you're part of the background noise. Uh, but there's just so many exhilarating games. I mean, the Rams, there were great ones where they blocked a punt. My father was the first one who had a special teams coach, the very first special teams coach. For all your listeners, here's some good trivia, was Dick Vermeil with the LA Rams. Because my father felt he was really the one who first had any special teams coach. And the second, Dick Vermeil then went on to UCLA, and he's still a good friend of our family. The second special teams coach was Marv Levy, another Hall of Fame coach. And I was just at his 100th birthday. He invited me to a birthday party at Canton, the Hall of Fame at Canton, Ohio. And he's still alive. He's still with it. And
That's
at
great.
any rate, special teams so often would make key plays. I mean, when my father came to the Redskins, there was he had left the Rams, gotten fired by the Rams, went to the Redskins, and then a Monday night game at the LA Coliseum. So, and he had traded for a bunch of Rams, and they were playing against the Rams, and the game was a crucial game, 13th game of the season. That's when they had a 14-game season, and whoever won the game would make the playoffs, and whoever lost would miss it, and they won. It was just great revenge. Revenge can be a motivation. That was exhilarating. There was one game, another Monday night game, where Eddie Brown, who's a player that my father traded for, he played on 4 of my father's teams, the Redskins, the Rams, the Chicago Blitz, and the Arizona Wranglers. And I see him every time I go to a Tennessee game. He's a Tennessee grad. It was a monsoon of a rainstorm. The field, this is an RFK Stadium. The field, there were 9 turnovers in this game. The ball was like a greased pig, so to speak, and the field was puddling up with water. And Eddie Brown had a punt return, weaving, stumbling, and a punt return for a touchdown. And it was just an unbelievable athletic feat, but his special teams winning it. The other one was another Monday night game, this against the Dallas Cowboys. And Kenny Houston just had his, 81st birthday yesterday. But he made a great tackle on the goal line. They threw the pass to Walt Garrison, he was a cowboy, a Dallas Cowboy, but a real cowboy. He was a bulldogger. He was a bulldogger at Oklahoma State. He gets the ball. Kenny Houston comes up, great safety, another Hall of Famer that my father traded for. And he stopped him right there on the 1-yard line. And the amount of time it took to see, gosh, did Garrison get in or did he stop him? And it was only a second or two, but it seemed like a minute of drama. And it's just the greatest tackle. And won the game. So,
Yeah.
the Cowboys didn't come back. So I mean, those are some of those.
Yeah, those are great
sideline memories.
Well, you mentioned political trivia, so I've got a political trivia question for you that I don't expect you to know. This is not a fair question, but it is in my memory, and you brought it to my mind. The year was 2002. Frank Beamer was coach at Virginia Tech at the time, and Virginia Tech was scheduled to play Arkansas State University Red Wolves from Jonesboro, Arkansas. Not our flagship school, the Razorbacks, but this was the Division One, and they played Virginia Tech. Coach Beamer came to the Republican conference. So all the Republican senators are there. You don't remember this. You were there, 2002. I remember we got a picture in front of the conference holding the football, and I think I unwisely made a bet with you. We were heavy underdogs, but we lost 63-7 in Blacksburg. Now, the trivia question is, how many times altogether has Arkansas State University played Virginia Tech in their series?
Once.
No, they played 4 times.
Really?
But that time in 2002 was the worst defeat they ever had. I hope they got a good payout.
Well, Coach Beamer is a great guy, and I liked him because he also, they call it Beamer ball, and he also emphasized special teams. And I remember I was out in California. This is when I was a senator. My brother Bruce was with the Raiders at the time, and so they were playing in whatever Diamond Almond Bowl or whatever it was in San Francisco. And I went to their practices. I love their practices and practicing block punts. And they would have pads on the players' hands who are doing the blocking, because it's block a punt, it's going to hurt your hands. It's with the violence it's hitting. And I really liked him. In fact, every year I go to at least one Virginia Tech game at Virginia. It's by far the best football in Virginia experience. And there's a coach, their defensive coach is someone, I'm not going to get into all this, but that's great. I would have loved, in fact, I have a ball in here signed by Druckenmiller, who might have been the quarterback in that game.
Could have been. I hope, like I said, I hope ASU got a good payout, because they sure took a drubbing that day.
Well, that's the thing that happens. My father's last year in his life, he was coaching at Long Beach State, and their first game was at Clemson.
Oh my!
And they got beat. They ended up with a winning season. They beat Nevada, Las Vegas at the end of the season and ended winning season. But these teams play these games to get money. It pays for their program, and they're just cannon fodder. My father, it was on the schedule, and they were getting however many hundreds of thousands of dollars. But his worry was they're going to have so many players get injured in that game that when you play teams that are comparable and at your level, like Fresno State and Boise State and Nevada, Las Vegas, those were the teams in that same conference that you're going to be injured from it. And so I understand that's just the economics of places like Arkansas State, who now have Butch Jones as their coach now.
Right.
So I actually pay attention to the Red Wolves.
You really do. In fact, I was just going to say, I think you would have made a fantastic football coach, but something drew you toward politics. So tell us, what attracted you to the political world?
All right. Well, I saw my father never had a losing season, and he got fired all the time. I said, I'll get into politics. It's much more stable, which it's not. Interestingly, the reason I got involved in politics was through football. We moved out to California in 1966. And at that very same time, Ronald Reagan was running for governor for the first time. And he came to an LA Rams practice. And he was there shoulder to shoulder with my father, asking about the drills they're running and, all that. And I'm just thinking, gee, politicians. I grew up in a football family, not political. I said, the politicians usually want 50-yard line seats. They're not at a dreary, boring practice. But he was involved in it. And I said, well, here's a politician who knows what's important, football. And Reagan ultimately won the election. And so I followed him. I was in high school at the time, and I followed what he was doing as governor of California. And then we moved to Virginia. And in late 1975, I get a message that Ronald Reagan wants me to be chairman of Young Virginians for Reagan. In 1976, he was challenging President Gerald Ford for the Republican nomination. And so I got on the phone with him and I said, Governor, I really know nothing about organized politics. I wasn't in the college Republicans. I majored in history, not political science or any of that stuff. I had buckarooed on ranches out west in Nevada and Idaho. I said, but I like debating. I like arguing with people. I love telling folks what a great job you did as governor of California and your great ideas for America's future. And he says, well, all you got to do is keep doing that. I said, oh, all right, I'll do it. And so we were the rebels, to be against President Ford. And we won Virginia. Reagan lost the nomination, but that's what's got me involved in organized politics. And then in later years, some of those old hands, more senior than me, inveigled me or encouraged me to run for the House of Delegates in the Charlottesville area. And I lost the first time I ran. You learn a lot from it. I had gotten a knee operation and phlebitis from playing the alumni football game, stupidly getting in on the kickoff rather than playing quarterback. And in fact, Reagan called. I'm in the hospital with all of this, and he called. This is in '79. He was out of office, and just wanted to encourage me, to recover and all that. And then all the nurses actually paid more attention to me, other than saying, "Who's this goober in here?" Gee, Governor, President, Ronald Reagan called him. He must be important. So, at any rate, and then obviously Reagan won in 1980, and then I ran in 1982 and narrowly won by a whopping 25 votes after the recount. But it's Ronald Reagan, and the interesting thing is, presently, I'm chairman of the Reagan Ranch Board of Governors. That's preserving Ronald Reagan's Rancho del Cielo, the Reagan Ranch, Western White House, as well as his boyhood home in Dixon, Illinois. So, and focused on young people. It's with the Young America's Foundation.
It is,
and so there's kind of a symmetry.
Yeah. The arc of a career. Reagan started it, and Ronald Reagan. The whole generation of young political figures were inspired by Ronald Reagan. I'm a little older than you, but I was in junior high school when Reagan made his speech on behalf of Barry Goldwater in 1964. A time for choosing. And I sat there in front of that black and white TV, and I said, that he's saying what I believe. And I started the Young Republicans in high school, and Reagan inspired so many people by his life and his legacy to get involved. That's quite a story. And many of our viewers may not know that you served in the House of Delegates, but that's pretty good training ground for Congress.
Yeah, it was. I had Thomas Jefferson's seat in the House of Delegates. I had Albemarle and Nelson County. My political heroes are Thomas Jefferson. I always would characterize myself as a common sense Jeffersonian conservative, trusting free people and free enterprise. And as long as you're not harming someone else, leave people alone.
Yeah.
The other hero is, there's three heroes. The other's Ronald Reagan, obviously. Because I look at him as the embodiment of those founding principles of optimism of our country, his humility, his cheer, and obviously his policies. And the other's Davy Crockett is the other one for political courage. Crockett came up a really tough life in East Tennessee and throughout Tennessee, and he was a member of Congress, and everyone remembers Crockett from remembering the Alamo and dying at the Alamo for Texas independence. But before that, he was a member of Congress, and he had been involved in the Indian Wars under Colonel Jackson and all that. He was part of the original Tennessee Mounted Volunteers and fought in those Indian Wars in present-day Alabama, generally speaking. And he voted against the Indian Removal Act that the Trail of Tears and all of that. They went through Arkansas eventually
They
to
did right into
Oklahoma,
Oklahoma. Yeah.
but he voted against it and thought it was wrong, and because of that, he lost his reelection. But he stood up, and that's a tough vote.
Yeah.
Here's Jackson from Tennessee. You're a congressman from Tennessee, and you're voting against Jackson. And of course, all the interests wanted the Indians removed because then they could, speculate on the land. And then as he left Tennessee, he gave a speech and he said, "You all may go to hell. I'm going to Texas." And then died at the Alamo. And the lesson from those who died at the Alamo, they didn't need to be at the Alamo. Travis, Crockett, Bowie, but they were fighting for an independent country and the ability to govern themselves. And everyone remembers the Alamo. My lesson from it is it's not how long you live, it's what you do with your time here on earth that matters.
Yeah.
And that's why Reagan, Jefferson, and Crockett are my heroes.
Well, but I tell you, listening to you, George, I know you're a history major, but it underscores the value of American history. And I think it is such a need today in our high schools and our colleges to most Americans, they can't tell you how many branches of government there are. It's kind of sad. And there's so many lessons from history. You just shared some of them. Now,
you know what? I just was yesterday, I was the only Republican in an after action review of the elections, disastrous elections for Republicans in Virginia. And somehow we brought up one of the Democrat folks were talking about history. And I said, you know what? Kids graduating from high school in Virginia, they argue over what history standards. As a bare minimum, students graduating from high school ought to be able to pass the same test that new citizens pass to become a U.S. citizen. That's a minimum. It should be way more than that. And I know that Tennessee and Texas and some states, maybe Arkansas, there are some states that do it. And the Democrats in Virginia fight it because they think tests are too stressful for kids. I said, gee whiz. I mean, at a minimum, they would know these things, the branches of government, the separations of power, the checks and balances, how many senators are there, and how are the number of members of Congress? I mean, these are just basics. And one of the things that frustrate me, and I see this through the Young America's Foundation that's focused on young people, college students, high school kids as well, is geographic illiteracy, historical illiteracy, and economic illiteracy. The fact that socialism is somehow popular shows that people don't even know what socialism is and how it's failed everywhere. And whereas the free market, free enterprise system lifts people up, it's competitive, individuals have choice rather than government directing your choices and decisions in life or what products or services you want to buy.
How true. So, George, I Arkansan forever, but I lived in Virginia for a number of years and came to appreciate the Commonwealth and its unbelievable history as a part of our country. You were governor of the Commonwealth and then U.S. Senator. So I got to ask you to compare which gratified you more? Where do you think you made the biggest difference?
As governor, there's no doubt about it. The governor of Virginia is accorded a great deal of authority. We made promises in our campaign for truth in sentencing and abolishing parole and requiring able-bodied people to work and welfare is not to be a permanent way of life, juvenile justice, high academic standards, and accountability in our schools. I wanted the world to know Virginia was open for business, and we were able to attract over 312,000 net new jobs. It became the Silicon Dominion with the semiconductor fabs that we were able to recruit. And the Senate's great, but it's a board of directors rather than being CEO. The people in the Senate are articulate, they're smart, they're collegial folks, but they don't mind not getting anything done. I'd make more decisions in one morning than you make all week in the Senate. I got in trouble by somebody asked me a question similar to what you did, and they said, "What do you think of the Senate compared to being governor?" And I said, "The Senate moves at the pace of a wounded sea slug, and it just takes so long." And I guess it's part of the process.
I,
but I'm one who likes to get things done. I enjoyed the honor of serving in both, but actually having an impact on the people of Virginia. Uh, Clearly, being governor,
there,
you can get more done.
as you know, there a lot of former governors end up in the U.S. Senate.
Correct.
I've never met one who didn't say what you just said. The most frustrated senator I ever knew was George Voinovich from Ohio. He'd been governor in Ohio, and he just tore his hair out the fact that the Senate it didn't move. It was so slow, and used to being an executive. So, you gave the answer I thought you might give. Uh, how did your time as governor shape your view of federalism and state leadership and the relationship between the states and the federal government?
Well, from the beginning, I always, I care about the Constitution, and the 10th Amendment to the Bill of Rights is that powers not granted to the federal government are reserved to the people or the states. And I look at the states as laboratories of innovation, or sometimes they're called the laboratories of democracy. And you can, I like that. I like competition between the states. Every state is equally burdened or helped by whatever federal policies are. But the differentiation is, what are the states doing? And I looked at the top responsibilities of a state government. Like the federal government's paramount responsibility is national defense. And you want to have unfettered interstate commerce amongst the states. But for the states, your top responsibilities, in my view, are education and law enforcement. And the way you pay for it is with a vibrant economy where people are working, businesses are prospering, and you get more revenues in. Now, how you do that in the way we did it, and you measure it. What gets measured gets better. It's like you have a scoreboard in sports. You don't guess what the score is of a basketball game. There's a scoreboard. And so you want to measure. Economic development is how much investment, how many net new jobs. That's why I wanted testing in our schools in third, fifth, end of middle school and high school for reading, writing, math, science, economics, and history. And so you could see how students are doing. Don't just socially promote them from grade to grade. They need to learn that level. If they need added help, go to summer school, tutoring, or whatever. Welfare reform. We're the first state in the country to pass statewide welfare reform. There had been some isolated ones in Michigan and in Wisconsin, but we're the first statewide, doing it 2 years before the federal Congress and President Clinton ultimately signed that welfare reform. And we measure welfare reform success by how many people are leading independent, self-reliant lives rather than how many people are getting welfare. And we cut the rolls in half, and that's great. And crime, you look at what's the violent crime rate, or and look at the recidivist rate or the repeat offender rate, since 3/4 of all crime are committed by repeat offenders. If they're serving longer sentences, they're not lurking in a parking garage to rape someone once again. And so by all those measurements, Virginia was made safer, better, and more prosperous for people who live and learn and work and raise their families. Yeah. So that's a long way of saying you can get things done. And we had a Democrat majority in the legislature, so I had to get some Democrats to sponsor these monumental reforms, and then they endure longer.
Well, you're the states being the laboratories of democracy. That's really true. And
yeah, and you know what? And the other thing is, some states will do things, and you'll say that's a good idea, and you say, "Gosh, they've done." And I even mentioned earlier, I said, "Well, Tennessee and Texas have the citizenship test in it, so you can learn." Then you had other states. I'll give another example. Tennessee had this thing called TennCare, which was it was a healthcare thing that everyone said, "Oh, this is great." It ended up being a disaster. And you say, or you could look right now, California is doing such and such, or New York is doing such and such. You say, look at that. People are moving out of that state. People and businesses are not trees. They could move, and they do move. And so the high cost of living and high taxes and not having a right to work law and high electricity prices, a lot of crime and all, people are exiting places like New Jersey, New York, Illinois, and California, and they're moving to the Carolinas and Tennessee and Florida and Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, out west, out of California. So, you can learn from the mistakes of others as well as learn from good ideas.
So, George, I think our viewers today are already seeing that you are known for your straight talk. So, in an institution, the U.S. Senate, where it's known for, used to be known for collegiality, and what kind of relationship did you have to your colleagues as the straight talker that you are?
It was good. The people were collegial. I got Teddy Kennedy upset at me at one time, and he was just really screaming and yelling. And with it, I said, "Well, it's just the way I did say. I never want to get accustomed to the way y'all think around here." But it was funny. There's Jim Bunning was easy because he played sports. I remember one time we were at one of our lunches, and Bunning was always in a sour mood.
Always, always.
Yeah, always. And so everyone started booing him. These are his Republican colleagues because he was grousing about who knows what. And he says, "Go ahead. I've been booed by 30,000 fans at Yankee Stadium. I don't care." And I think Judd Gregg from New Hampshire says, "Yeah, you're probably booed by 40,000 in Tiger Stadium too," when he was playing for them. And one of the things I found is that it's important to have integrity in your life, stick to your principles, and never make a promise that you don't intend to keep. Your word is really important. I remember John McCain. I wanted to get on the Commerce Committee, and I got on. He was chairman, and I was constantly voting against some of the things he was doing. He wanted all sorts of things that would reduce states' rights, in fact, and so forth. And so he was so upset with me, and he says, "It'd be nice. I've got you on my committee that just once you'll vote with me." And this is my first few months, and I said, "Well, it's this, and this is my principles." I mean, he'd grit his teeth. You'd think he'd break them. He was just so upset with me. And so then we got into that campaign finance reform, McCain-Feingold. You remember all of that?
I remember it well.
And I said, "I am going to vote for any amendment to this that has greater freedom or greater disclosure, transparency." Yeah. So as you might, I remember that. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of votes. It went on for weeks.
Yeah.
With all the amendments, Fred Thompson had a pretty good alternative to it, but there were amendments all over. And so there would be maybe a few of these amendments I'd actually be with McCain on for his position that I'd vote for. And so finally, at the end of all of this, he came up to me and he says, "We've been watching your votes." I said, "Oh, good. Isn't that interesting?" I couldn't care less. And he said, "You actually voted the way you told me you're going to vote." I said, "Yeah. What's the big deal?"
Surprise,
he thought that he was somewhat amazed. And then they have the cloakroom back there when you're going late at night and you have a TV on in there and people are eating cookies or pizza or whatever. And so the question was whether to put on a hockey game or a basketball game. And I said hockey. And McCain agreed with hockey. And that was the first time we found any agreement on any matter. And then we're watching a football game. And I started talking about George Welsh, who was the coach at the University of Virginia, previously at Navy. And McCain, so I'm talking about George Welsh. And so McCain, and this is months after he wanted to have some regulation on college betting or prohibit college betting. I forgot what it was, but I had voted against him. And so, but nearly a year later, he says, Coach Welsh it was for my bill that you voted against. I mean, he would remember these kind of things. But you find allies like Ron Wyden, of Oregon, liberal Democrat, but he and I agreed that there shouldn't be taxes on access to the internet. And so we had that commonality. And then we both were the lead sponsors on the National Nanotechnology Initiative. And Ron would come over to me and he'd say, "Georgie, can you be with me on such and such?" I said, "No." He said, "Okay, fine, just wanted to ask." But it's good. You end up with, and Tim, I'm sure you have examples where there's somebody who's a Democrat that you agree with 5% of the time, but on those 5%, you work together to achieve that goal, and that's the kind of consensus that seems to be missing a lot
Yep.
right now to actually get things done rather than worrying about partisanship.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great lesson for if we could talk to the conference today, that would be the message. And I hear that over and over again in these interviews. So you have talked about. I want to give you one last question. You've talked about a lot of individuals. You've met presidents and politicians and football coaches. And is there anybody just overwhelmingly sticks out who made an impression upon you that, for good or bad, or for funny or unfunny, but just a big impression?
Well, I think it's a combination of everyone. Obviously, my mother and father had the greatest influence on me, and through that, I've been very lucky, very blessed, fortunate to have run into folks like President Reagan. He's probably the one who's had the greatest outside of my family, uh, as an example of how to carry oneself. But everyone's an individual. There's never going to be another Ronald Reagan, but
Yeah.
you try to emulate or aspire to have those principles. Overall, growing up in the world of sports, and anybody reflects on their lives, the great thing about sports is it's a meritocracy. And I think back on the teams I played in, whether it's rugby or football, and the players on my father's teams, they were like a family. They're very together, but they were so disparate. They're different religions, different races, different ethnicities, some, from different parts of the country, some of them from other countries, kickers generally, uh, from other places. And none of that mattered. It didn't matter what their background was. All that matters is, can you help the team win? Uh, and that's what I think we should aspire to in our society, that everyone, no matter their background, their race, their religion, ethnicity, gender, and so forth, doesn't matter. It should be a level playing field for everyone to compete and succeed based on their own hard work, their diligence, their ingenuity. And that's what we should aspire to. And people love sports. And you get the highest ratings, and it's content that is as compelling. But if we had a society that had that same sense of meritocracy, and the other thing missing is the concept of sportsmanship. You fight hard, you advocate vociferously for your side, for your ideas, for your candidates, or your product, whatever it may be. Then the game's over, you shake hands. And I remember watching a boxing match where these two guys are trying to knock each other out, beating their heads, fist to head. After it, they hugged each other, and I thought, gee, but we ought to have more of that in trusting and preserving our republic, our representative democracy, the competition of ideas. The voters, the people, are the owners of the government, and I don't like what the results were in Virginia, but you have to accept it and learn from it and try to do a better job persuading the owners of the government, the voters, in the next election, and try to play tenacious defense against bad ideas that hopefully are not too deleterious to your state or to your country.
George, I'm honored to have gotten to serve with you, and thank you for joining us, not just to revisit the past, but to remind us why it matters. And your blend of conviction and candor, a rare thing in public life, is admired. It's been a privilege to share time with you together. To our listeners, may this conversation inspire you to lead with courage and listen with humility, and never underestimate the power of a good story or a good cigar. And so until next time, this is the Cigar Caucus, where legacy lives and conversation endures.